Robby, what's on your radar today?
So raucous pro-Palestine protests have taken over college campuses across the country for the past several days. At the University of California, Los Angeles, protesters had declared areas of campus off limits to pro-Israel students and blocked them from entering certain spaces, even just to get to class. Now at night, masked counter-protesters attacked that pro-Palestinian encampment, tearing down barricades and even shooting fireworks at the protesters. At the University of Texas, Austin, police brutally dispersed student protesters. Green Party presidential candidate Jill Stein was among those arrested at Washington University in St. Louis. Administrators at Brown University persuaded protesters to disband their encampment peacefully after agreeing to discuss their demands for financial divestment from companies that do business with the Israeli military. But events had really begun at Columbia University, and those came to a dramatic end after the authorities finally tired of the occupation of Hamilton Hall. Protesters had smashed the windows of the administrative building, entered it, taken over the building, held a janitor hostage, and demanded humanitarian aid, not for Gaza, but for themselves, i.e. they wanted snacks.
Why should the university be obligated to provide food to people who've taken over a building?
First of all, we're saying that they're obligated to provide food to students who pay for a meal plan here.
But you mentioned that there was a request that food and water be brought in, unless I misunderstood.
To allow it to be brought in. I guess it's ultimately a question of what kind of community and obligation Columbia feels it has to its students. Do you want students to die of dehydration and starvation or get severely ill, even if they disagree with you? If the answer is no, then you should allow basic, it's crazy to say because we're on an Ivy League campus, but this is like basic humanitarian aid we're asking for. Like, could people please have a glass of water?
But they did put themselves in that very deliberately, in that situation and in that position. So it seems like you're sort of saying, we want to be revolutionaries, we want to take over this building. Now would you please bring us food and water?
Nobody's asking them to bring anything. We're asking them to not violently stop us from bringing in basic humanitarian aid.
So it's easy to make fun of these protesters, many of whom seem to know very little about why they are even protesting, and some of their antics deserve not just mockery, but condemnation. Statements in support of terrorist violence, exhortations for Zionists to be killed or worse, are contemptible, as are tactics that involve preventing other students from moving about campus and pursuing their own education. But critics of the campus left should not lose sight of the much greater threat, which is that campus authority figures, members of law enforcement, and even national legislators will act in a manner that gravely threatens the free speech rights of everyone. Indeed, in response to the protests, identity-obsessed busybodies are already working overtime to criminalize protests on grounds that offensive speech is a threat to the safety of Jewish students. Now, these are not new arguments. For years, university bureaucrats have subtly chipped away at their institution's stated protections for free speech by invoking dubious safety concerns. You might remember the concept of the safe space, a very real notion frequently invoked by progressive student activists that being forced to confront speech with which they disagree was a form of physical violence. In my first book, Panic Attack: Young Radicals in the Age of Trump, I traveled to college campuses and interviewed activists. What I learned was that for a variety of reasons, their upbringing, their ideology, their social circles, they did not want free and unfettered debate. They thought that outside speakers, professors, and even other students should be silenced for expressing non-progressive views. In fact, they viewed the university administration's role as that of a parent shielding them from painful speech. Administrators were all too happy to comply, and school after school took steps to shield their most unreasonable students from emotional vulnerability. Not all of these efforts are explicitly contrary to free speech principles, even though they were universally silly. In 2016, for instance, the University of Pennsylvania created a safe space so that students spooked by Donald Trump's rise to the presidency could take time to breathe, play with coloring books, and pet some puppies. Duke University's 2016-era Safe Space, a production of the campus's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Bureaucracy, DEI, included the presence of a social worker. More perniciously, hundreds of campuses created bias incident reporting systems whereby students were instructed to call the campus authorities, in some cases the literal police, if they overheard anyone say something that could offend another person on the basis of a protected class, like race, gender, sexuality, or disability status. At Colby College, someone filed a bias incident report where they overheard the phrase, on the other hand. With no explanation given, though I gather the ever-vigilant person worried that a one-handed person might take offense at that remark. So these developments on campuses produce widespread mockery for many Democrats as well as Republicans. Aside from a minority of extremely difficult young people and the administrators who coddle them, most people do not think the university's job is to protect students from having their feelings hurt. Enter Congress. Unfortunately, many elected officials are hypocrites, and during a perceived crisis like the one unfolding on college campuses right now, they are all too eager to pass bad laws. Case in point, on Wednesday, yesterday, the U.S. House of Representatives passed the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act by a margin of 320 to 91. This bill empowers the Education Department to take action against educational institutions that do not sufficiently combat anti-Semitic speech on campus. It also defines anti-Semitism incredibly broadly. Representative Thomas Massey, who voted against the bill, a Republican, pointed out on X that political statements about Israel would be effectively criminalized if the bill became law. Some of the statements deemed impermissible include denying the Jewish people their right to self-determination with respect to a Jewish state and, quote, applying a double standard to the state of Israel. Now, it should go without saying those are political judgments, but the First Amendment robustly protects that kind of speech, the right to disagree with the aims of the state of Israel or its government. This bill obviously flagrantly unconstitutional and, moreover, a clear violation of the idea that college students don't need protection from uncomfortable speech. Universities must protect their campuses from violence and harassment, whether that is motivated by anti-Semitism, some other political animus, or any other cause or no other cause at all. It's the action that counts, not the content of the belief. We don't criminalize thought crime. Now, the collective national media is obsessed with the campus protests, and understandably so. The spectacle of disproportionately elite, privileged young people resorting to histrionics, frequently amusing to general audiences. But people should feel free to mock them. Let's not forget, however, that U.S. Congress is using them as a pretext to grant vast new powers to federal bureaucrats with the explicit goal of enshrining into law a new right not to be offended. That would be one giant safe space.
Yeah, that's what so much of this has been about, vilifying people to justify criminalizing them. I mean, one could argue that the whole trajectory of the empowerment of our criminal justice state has been in response to the multi-hundred years long project of vilifying Black people and justifying a overly funded criminal justice system, which has created the largest incarcerated population on the planet, with 25% of the world's incarcerated people, despite only having 5% of the world's population here in the United States of America. And now there's a different target. I shouldn't say a different target, because historically, and I talked about this back when I was defending Marjorie Taylor Greene's call to defund the police, historically, 85% of intelligence agency targets, FBI, what have you, have been targeted against left-leaning activists, communists, socialists, people who have been fighting for the civil rights and liberties of marginalized people in the United States of America, and particularly for poor and working class people in the United States of America. And we've seen this trend really escalate in recent years, starting, I think, with the George Floyd movement the BLM movement back in 2014. Obviously, it escalated with the George Floyd protest in 2020. But again, those groups were vilified. The right-wing media and a lot of liberal media engaged in painting those people as folks who deserved the harsh arm of the law being applied to them. And now what is the outcome? We have a Fifth Circuit case which constructively makes it impossible to protest. We have laws that say you have to make a loyalty pledge to Israel to get a government contract in the South. And we have had multi-million developments like Cop City, where you're building military bases in Georgia to police the population that are being trained specifically by Israel. And now those troops are being used to put down students in the Atlanta area. You're seeing videos of Morehouse students being tased for protesting Palestine that are very reminiscent of the kind of imagery we saw of Black people being having disproportionate force used against them by the police then. And so the question is, are Americans finally going to realize that allowing a draconian authoritarian state to manifest simply because it's going after someone you don't like isn't a very good idea? And of course, liberals can be charged with that kind of myopia too when they see certain kinds of overreach being directed toward Trump-affiliated people and don't speak up. That is completely true and fair. But this is a big issue that nobody can look away from right now. When you see riot gear, bomb-proof tanks driving down the Upper West Side because a few dozen college students, unarmed, are peacefully sitting in front of a building, when we're characterizing a broken window as something that is requiring the full force of the NYPD, and we're seeing an ideological push by those state-run institutions where they're not just clearing out a building, they're choosing to take down a Palestinian flag and to put up an American flag. That's not the police's job, right? When you see Eric Adams talking about these are terrorists, and you've talked so persuasively over the years about how national security interests are used to justify this kind of overreach. Well, now we're seeing the head of the New York, the mayor of New York and the head of the police calling students terrorists, and now there's a new lawsuit against Students for Justice of Palestine and some other groups, literally charging them under Terrorist Act and RICO Acts. For the crime of speech. I said it in my radar last week, and I'll say it again. This is one of the most draconian moments that I've ever witnessed in American history. And I think you're really right to
and this
ring
is
the alarm.
An effort to put on the books more of exactly what you're describing, more more avenues for authority figures to bring charges or lawsuits or whatever it is against people exercising their First Amendment rights. And this bill specifically uses the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's definition of anti-Semitism, and the Anti-Defamation League, which we've criticized a lot, I've criticized and you've criticized, they say they actually don't support this definition being adopted in a legal context, although they support it for trainings, and of course this is like a middle ground where this is going to be some legally mandated training or regime for universities that Congress is calling in. Anyway, I was glad to see people like Thomas, obviously a lot of progressive Democrats voted against it. Just 20 Republicans voted against it, including Thomas Massey. And I have seen actually some criticism from very right-leaning people like Matt Walsh and a few others. Charlie Kirk saying this is exactly how we create the new institution of our censorship on campus if this kind of thing goes forward.
Yeah, I mean, it makes it a hate crime to say anti-Zion, to be critical of Zionism. Right. And some people were pointing out that it would make, there are kind of kinds of Judaism that also reject Zionism. Right. So you're going to say whole categories of Jewish people based on their belief structure are also definitionally anti-Semitic. It makes absolutely no sense and could very well result in real harm coming to those groups as well. It's pernicious.
All right, more Rising right after this.